Sheriff Marty Sawyer walked to the podium on the morning of July 9th, wearing a pink ribbon and a pink tie. He had spent the previous week running the most emotionally taxing investigation his office had ever worked on. He had been there for the 911 call that started everything, for the 4 days of searching in near 100-degree heat, for the arrests of the parents on July 4th, for the bond hearings where both defendants appeared without attorneys, for the days of searching at Cedar Creek Reservoir in Fairfield County. He had been there for all of it. And now, he was standing at the podium to tell the community of Aiken what his investigators had found. He started by thanking the hundreds of law enforcement officers, first responders, and volunteers who had joined the search over the preceding 9 days. He called the past week heart-wrenching. He said these updates never get easier to share. He thanked the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, the Department of Natural Resources, and every agency that had contributed. And then he said, "Personally, there are some very harsh words I would like to use about Johmarea and Michilae and their actions. But I will not do that. I will not do that to protect and maintain the integrity of this case. But I will tell you this. I will not refer to them as mom and dad or mother and father. They don't deserve that title." And then he confirmed what the 9 days of investigation had produced. Some of Javeayah Harris's remains had been recovered from Cedar Creek Reservoir in Fairfield County, South Carolina, the body of water known locally as Stumpy Pond. DNA testing confirmed the remains were consistent with the biological offspring of Michilae Herring and Javeayah Harris. And then he told the community what had been done to her. Through forensic evidence, extensive and deliberate efforts were made to destroy and conceal evidence following Javeayah's death. Our information reveals the use of corrosive chemicals and other tools that were used to accelerate the destruction of her little body. And then the parents poured what remained of Javeayah into the reservoir. He called their actions repulsive and revolting. He said these subjects went to great lengths to cover their revolting and repulsive actions. And then he said the sentence that will follow this case for as long as it is remembered. "In my 37 years in law enforcement, I have never, ever heard of anything so horrific." And then, "It is unlikely that the entirety of Javeayah's body or any other remains will be recovered. We had all hoped and prayed to find her body, but with the information we have uncovered, that is simply not possible. She was 4 years old, and what is left of her will never be completely found." This is Forensic Disconnect, and today we are going to cover in full what the July 9th press conference revealed, what the bond hearings showed about the state of the legal case, the specific warrants detail that has not received enough attention, how both parents confessed after maintaining their story for only a short time, what the community of Aiken did in response to every devastating development, and the new legislative push that Javeayah's name is now driving in South Carolina. Before we go further, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Here at Forensic Disconnect, we cover the cases that deserve to be remembered. Subscribe. Let's start with what the July 9th press conference added to the record, because each press conference in this case brought specific documented details that changed the public picture of what happened. The most significant new detail from July 9th was the word poured. Sheriff Sawyer used that word specifically. Not disposed of, not placed, not deposited. Poured. The specific physical act of taking what the chemicals had not fully destroyed and emptying it into Cedar Creek Reservoir. The arrest warrants confirmed the disposal occurred on June 8, 2026. That is 22 days before the 911 call that Michilae Herring made on June 30th. 22 days during which the parents continued their ordinary lives while Javeayah was in a reservoir in Fairfield County. The second major detail was the recovery limitation. "It is unlikely that the entirety of Javeayah's body or any other remains will be recovered," Sawyer said. That statement is the specific accounting of what corrosive chemicals applied thoroughly enough do to a human body. They do not destroy everything, but they destroy enough that what remains, poured into a large body of water and distributed by current, and time, becomes largely unrecoverable. The sheriff did not say no remains would be found. He said the entirety would not be found. Some were recovered. Some is all that will ever be recovered. The third detail was the DNA confirmation. The remains sent to the State Law Enforcement Division for testing were confirmed to be consistent with the biological offspring of Michilae Herring and Johmarea Harris. That specific forensic language, consistent with the biological offspring, is how the science says, "This is Javeayah." The DNA profile of the fragments recovered from Stumpy Pond matches what would be expected from the biological child of these two specific people. The fourth detail was the new charges. Additional counts of destruction and desecration of human remains were filed against both parents, adding to the homicide by child abuse charges already filed and the false police report charge against Herring. The charge structure, as it now stands, means Herring faces 3 separate criminal charges and Harris faces 2. Sawyer was wearing a pink ribbon and a pink tie. He wore them in honor of a 4-year-old described to a 911 dispatcher as wearing pink Minnie Mouse pajamas and having pink beads in her braided hair. He chose to wear the color deliberately. He had been looking for her for 9 days. He stood at that podium in pink because the 9 days of this investigation had taught him who she was, and he wanted the community to know that he knew. Now let's go to the bond hearings, because the specific details that emerged from the July 5th hearings reveal something important about the legal landscape of this case and about the state of the 2 defendants who are now awaiting trial. Both Michilae Herring and Javeayah Harris appeared at their bond hearings without attorneys. 2 people facing homicide by child abuse charges appeared before a magistrate judge without legal representation. The magistrate said he did not have the authority to set bond because of the severity of the charges. That decision would go to a circuit court judge within the next 30 days. Both were denied bond at those hearings. Both were returned to the Aiken County Detention Center. Herring told the magistrate judge she works for Transcom, earns $300 every 2 weeks, and lives with Harris. Harris did not address the judge directly at his hearing. Both appeared in jail clothing. The absence of attorneys at the bond hearings is significant in several ways. It means neither defendant had retained private counsel in the 4 days between arrest and the hearing. It means the public defender appointment process had not yet been initiated or completed. And it tells you something specific about the financial and social resources available to 2 people, ages 22 and 23, who had been working entry-level jobs and living together in Aiken. The first formal court appearances are scheduled for September 18th. Those appearances will be the next significant milestone. Attorneys will be fully engaged by then. The prosecution and defense will begin laying out their respective positions. The specific timeline for trial will start to be established. Now let's address a detail in the warrants that has not received sufficient public attention. The warrant for Johmarea Harris states specifically that he contributed to concealing Javeayah's death by failing to report it and by leaving the child's body in the home between May 1st and June 15th. Not by taking her somewhere, not by an act of disposal, by leaving her in the home, while the household continued to function around her. That specific allegation adds a dimension to the timeline that changes how you understand what was happening on Hillsborough Street between May and June 2026. Not a household where something terrible happened and was immediately concealed through decisive action. A household where something terrible happened and remained present for days or weeks while the people responsible continued going to work, running errands, attending appointments, living their lives around a 4-year-old child who was dead in their home. Harris went to work at DHL during that period. Herring went to work at Transcom and attended prenatal appointments. The healthcare providers who saw Herring during her prenatal care were interacting with a woman who was living with her daughter's body in the home she returned to every day. And on June 8th, the 2 parents used corrosive chemicals on Javeayah's remains and poured what was left into Cedar Creek Reservoir. The warrant-specific allegation that Harris left the body in the home is the behavior that establishes his criminal liability under the extreme indifference standard. Not just the failure to seek medical care in the moment of the injury, the active, sustained choice to maintain the concealment, to not report the death, to allow the body to remain in the home, to continue living as if nothing had happened, for a period that the warrant places between May 1st and June 15th. Now let's talk about what happened when the investigation started asking questions. Because the parents only managed to maintain their story for a short time before confessing. And the specific detail of how quickly the elaborate deception collapsed is important for understanding what the investigation actually found. They had executed what appeared, from the outside, to be a careful plan. The 911 call was made under the specific pressure of an imminent hospital admission. One investigator told local media that having a baby meant Herring was going to have to go to the hospital and explain where Javeayah was. So instead of telling everybody she had killed a child, she said she was missing and hoped that would be enough for everybody to go away. The call was made by a woman in active labor. It included specific, vivid details: the pink Minnie Mouse pajamas, the Crocs, the braided hair with pink beads, the chicken coop, the neighborhood context. It sounded like a mother desperate to find her daughter. And then the investigators started asking questions. The physical evidence at the home, the cell phone location data that placed the parents somewhere specific on June 8th, the specific inconsistencies between what the parents said and what the physical record showed, the interrogation. And within a short period of time, a period that reporting describes as brief, both parents confessed. Independently. Both of them. The confessions told investigators where to look. The specific information about Cedar Creek Reservoir, about the disposal date of June 8th, about the corrosive chemicals, all of this came from the confessions. And the investigators who went to Fairfield County and searched the reservoir found what the confessions said would be there. Now let's go to the community response in its full scope. Because what Aiken did in the days after June 30th represents something specific about how communities respond when they learn they have been lied to by the people whose need they tried to meet. The 4 days of searching began with genuine urgency and genuine care. 200 first responders, the FBI, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, and Highway Patrol, helicopters, drones, K-9 teams, boats, thousands of acres in heat that pushed the index to near 100 degrees, people who left their families and their weekends because a child was missing and needed to be found. The restaurant owner Alok Kumar Akse, who runs Taj of Aiken Indian Cuisine, prepared and delivered 60 meals to search crews on July 4th, the same day the arrests were announced and the search became something different from what it had been. 60 meals, delivered by a business owner who wanted the people searching for Javeayah to have something to eat on the day that the searching ended because her parents were in custody and what happened to her was becoming clear. The digital billboards at gas stations and businesses throughout Aiken displayed Javeayah's photograph during the search. A little girl with braided hair and a smile, staring out from signs that asked the community to look for her. A community that looked, that searched, that came out in the heat and the dark to find a child who was already in a reservoir. The vigils that followed were attended by people who had never met her. The first on July 5th at the alley in downtown Aiken. Candles and stuffed animals and community members who needed to be together. The second on July 9th at the event center on Shiloh Heights Road, beginning at 7:30 in the evening, held after the confirmation of her death. Mourners arrived packed shoulder to shoulder, arms overflowing with stuffed animals, balloons, and candles. Strangers held strangers. Children cried and held their parents. Some drove hours to attend. Others lived down the road. A third vigil was held in Union County at Foster Park. A fourth in Columbia County. Communities 2 hours away from Aiken gathering for a child they had never known, because the case had reached beyond Aiken, because what happened to Javeayah Harris is not a local story, but a story about what can happen when the systems designed to protect children fail to reach the children who need protection most. The memorial at the mailbox on Hillsborough Street grew every day. It began with one teddy bear. Within 24 hours of the July 9th press conference, it had tripled or quadrupled in size. Teddy bears, Disney balloons, candles, Minnie Mouse toys, flowers, handwritten notes, photographs. It grew until it covered the entire length of the front yard. Community member Armani Thomas said, "I didn't know her, but I knew I was a mom, and that is how we connect. That is how the Black community connects, as a family." Cinia Oatman said, "I have to keep an eye on all my little cousins, making sure they are okay, and when I come out here, it just makes me want to cry." Keandra Hollins said, "She didn't even get a chance to grow up, play with other kids. How could you do that?" 4 years old. 8-year-old Allie Toole came to leave balloons and said, "When they find that little girl's body, they should get the stuff from here and bring it to her grave." Former first responder Michelle Tabler said she had to call her adult daughter just to hear her voice because this case upset her so much. Hasina Span said she just would have been loved Even if it would not have been from her maternal and paternal parents, she just would have been loved. Now let's address the most significant new development of this week, which arrived on July 13th and represents the first concrete legislative response to Javeayah's death. State Representative Melissa Oramus, a Republican serving House District 84 in Aiken County, announced she is working on draft legislation she is calling Javeayah's Law. Oramus said the proposal is still early, and she expects it to change before any final bill is filed. But the draft she shared with local media outlines a broad set of possible changes. Tougher penalties in child abuse deaths. New penalties for concealing a child's death. A specific provision that would address precisely what Javeayah Harris and Michilae Herring did between May and June 2026. Changes to how the Department of Social Services and law enforcement agencies coordinate their responses to child welfare concerns. That last provision, changes to how DSS and law enforcement coordinate, is the specific legislative acknowledgement that the failure in Javeayah's case was not simply the failure of her parents. It was the failure of a system that had multiple opportunities to identify that something was wrong and did not produce an intervention. 2 domestic incidents at the household, prenatal care appointments throughout the period of Javeayah's death, a 4-year-old child in a household with documented conflict, a system with mandatory reporting requirements and coordination mechanisms that did not, in this case, reach Javeayah. The Change.org petition that has been circulating since the case emerged has now gathered more than 1,800 verified signatures. The petition is titled, "Pass Javeayah's Law. Close the federal hoax loophole and protect our children." It makes a specific legal argument about a gap in federal law. Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1038, allows strict financial penalties for certain hoaxes, bomb threats, for example. The statute imposes mandatory financial consequences on people who make false reports that generate emergency response resources. But the petition argues that the statute does not automatically impose the same mandatory financial consequences when someone fabricates a child's disappearance. The same emergency resources are consumed. The same community goodwill is exploited. The same law enforcement hours are spent. But the specific mandatory financial penalty that applies to a bomb threat does not automatically apply to a false missing child report. The petition is asking federal lawmakers to close that gap, to establish that fabricating a child's disappearance, deploying hundreds of first responders, the FBI, helicopters, drones, and K-9 teams to search for a child who is already dead, carries the same mandatory financial consequences as other federally penalized hoaxes. It is a specific, targeted legal argument, and it is being made by a community that spent 4 days in near 100-degree heat searching for a child whose parents had killed her and hidden her in a reservoir. Now let's address the legal path forward in its full complexity. The September 18th court appearances are the next milestone in a process that will unfold over months before any trial date is established. Both defendants will need attorneys. The Public Defender's Office of Aiken County will likely represent one or both of them unless they retain private counsel, which, given their reported financial circumstances, is unlikely. The attorneys who are appointed or retained will begin the discovery process, reviewing the investigation's evidence, examining the confessions for constitutional challenges, assessing the forensic testing, and developing the defense strategy that gives their clients the best outcome at trial. The prosecution's publicly known evidence is overwhelming. 2 independent confessions, DNA confirmation of recovered remains, arrest warrants detailing the specific timeline, the specific acts, and the specific failure to seek medical care, corroborating physical evidence from the home on Hillsborough Street and from Cedar Creek Reservoir. Cell phone location data. The false police report itself, recorded by the 911 dispatcher who took Herring's call. The prenatal medical records that document Herring's interactions with healthcare providers during the period of Javeayah's death. But overwhelming evidence does not eliminate the need for a trial. It does not eliminate the constitutional process by which the specific facts of a case are presented to a jury of 12 people who must reach a verdict beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense will challenge the confessions. Were Miranda rights administered? Were the defendants properly advised? Were the confessions given without coercion? The defense will challenge the forensic testing. Was the chain of custody maintained? Was the DNA analysis properly conducted? The defense will challenge every element of the prosecution's case, because that is what the constitutional system requires, and because the same constitutional protections that prevent false convictions of innocent people apply in this courtroom too. A trial will happen. Eventually. The September 18th appearances will begin the process that leads to it. And when that trial happens, the specific story of what happened to Javeayah Harris between May 1st and June 30th, 2026, the injury, the failure to seek care, the death, the concealment, the chemicals, the reservoir, the 911 call, will be laid out in full before a jury, for the record. Both parents confessed. The DNA confirmed the identification. The charges are filed. The case will proceed. Javeayah Harris was 4 years old. She had pink beads in her braided hair. She said yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and yes, sir, and no, sir. She was very smart. She could carry a full conversation. She liked the chicken coop. She was friendly to everyone. The memorial at her mailbox covers the entire front yard now. The people who never met her came to leave things for her. Teddy bears and Disney balloons and Minnie Mouse toys and candles and handwritten notes. Because they wanted her to know that the community was there, even when the people who were supposed to be there most were not. The sheriff who wore a pink tie and said he will not call them mother and father because they don't deserve that title has 37 years of law enforcement experience. He said he had never heard anything so horrific. The lawmaker who represents Aiken County in the South Carolina House is writing a bill with Javeayah's name on it. The community that searched for her is signing a petition with 1,800 names to make sure the federal law that penalizes false reports that waste emergency resources applies to the kind of false report that sent 200 first responders into 100-degree heat for 4 days looking for a little girl in pink Minnie Mouse pajamas. Her name is being written into law, into the memorial that covers the yard, into the petition that has 1,800 names, into the pink ribbon that the sheriff wore to the press conference where he announced they had found some of her and that the rest would probably never be found. She had pink beads in her braided hair. If you have any information related to the Javeayah Harris investigation, contact the Aiken County Sheriff's Office. Evidence can be submitted at aikensheriffsc.evidence.com, Axon, Community Request Public, Hillsborough, Harris. To report suspected child abuse in South Carolina, contact the DSS hotline at 1-888-CARE-FORUS or 1-888-227-3487. Hit the like button. Subscribe to Forensic Disconnect. Drop a comment about what you think needs to change to protect children in situations like Javeayah's. And tell us, do you think Javeayah's law would make a difference? We read every single comment. She had pink beads in her braided hair. We will be back tomorrow.